Hey there guys, it's your boy Patrick with the second official episode of the PatPajPodcast, and today we're going to go over UFC 235, the fight card that happened last week. Just a quick anecdote, this podcast is going to be my attempt not only to give my thoughts on fights and news in MMA, but also I'm going to be doing this to help broaden my own knowledge on MMA since I want to become a fighter in the future, as well as hopefully help anyone else who is planning on being a fighter or who is really into MMA and enjoys watching MMA. I just want to help explain some concepts and ideas in the fight game. And without a further ado, let's get into this fight card. I'm only going to go over the fights that I actually watched and considered worth watching, and some of the fights that I think are worth mentioning. So I didn't watch any of the early prelims, so no thoughts on Ebn Shahbazian, don't know how to say that one, Macy Kazian, don't know how to say that one either, or Hannah Kleifers. I also didn't watch Diego Sanchez versus Mickey Gall because one, I don't like Mickey Gall and I don't think he's a good fighter, and two, I hate watching Diego fight because he is so over the hill that he should have retired ages ago. But good on Diego for getting the win. Diego has always been a beast with his wrestling jiu-jitsu, and that's when I love watching him. When he goes to his wrestling, his striking has always been atrocious as he throws alternating hooks while making, that kia. He's doing that mean face and he's kiaing like he's doing a karate class. And the one sad thing about this is that Diego's probably going to keep on fighting and he's probably going to get knocked out again as soon as he fights somebody half decent. Didn't watch the Cody Stamann fight. Okay, Johnnie Walker versus Misha Cirkunov was the first fight that I ended up watching, and it was classic Walker performance. He came in and he finished the fight in under a minute basically, like his other two fights. And the thing is that because there is so little footage of him actually fighting in the UFC, I still don't know what Johnny's weaknesses and his strengths are besides blasting dudes within the first round. I thought that maybe Misha would be a good challenge since he was ranked, and that hopefully he could push Johnny and let us see something that we haven't seen before, but I was wrong. Johnny said that his team is asking for a fight against Gustafsson now, which would be a ginormous leap in competition, but the thing is that there's so little footage of Johnny that I don't know what game plan Alexander's team would have to come up with, but there's so much footage of Alexander that Johnny's team could make a game plan for Alexander. Whatever Johnnie Walker decides to do, I can't wait to see him back in the octagon. Next is Jeremy Stephens versus Zabit Magomedsharipov. Can't really say his last name, just rolls off the tongue like that. This was a hyped up fight because Zabit is a super hyped fighter because he's a Dagestani who loves to throw a bunch of spinning shit. This was, for me, Zabit's first real test in the UFC against the featherweight gatekeeper. Jeremy Stephens is a fighter that is pretty damn annoying to watch because besides people trying to hype up the fact that he's a knockout artist, even though he has only a handful of knockouts in recent years, he's a fighter that wants to get in on his opponents and start throwing wide clothesline swings to really hurt his opponents. The only thing is that he can't cut off the damn octagon to save his life. He's always following his opponents around, and it's only the opponents that don't mind their P's and Q's or think they can swing and bang with Jeremy that end up losing them. Another annoying thing is that Zabit has a really bad habit of just backing himself up into the fence as soon as anyone shows him any type of pressure. And even though Zabit has this bad habit, Jeremy still couldn't capitalize on Zabit. I was frustrated because all it was Zabit backing up close to the fence or backing up straight into the fence and simply circling off to his left while Jeremy was swinging straight arm at Zabit's head and missing, and doing the whole process for another 2.5 rounds, which is dumb on Jeremy's part because if you're chasing the guy who's taller than you and likes to lean back, just throw it to the body. Zabit is the taller and longer fighter and is always giving up space to avoid his opponent's attacks, and Jeremy didn't even realize that swinging from way out in the open wasn't doing him any favors. If he had just thought about kicking out Zabit's legs or throwing the body shots, he would have had Zabit tired and not be able to freely circle out in the open space like he was doing. And Zabit has such a bad habit of getting stuck on the cage that even the one moment that he tried something flashy and jumped off the cage to kick Stephens, his back was on the fence immediately and Stephens still couldn't capitalize it. So decent enough performance from Zabit and pretty bad performance on Jeremy's part, I thought. Next was Cody Garbrandt, and all I have to say is who is letting Cody, the guy who went from dominating arguably the best bantamweight of all time with a master game plan to this Buck T that keeps on getting finished with the same overhand right when he throws everything out of the bucket. Not to take away from Pedro because he was doing well keeping Cody off him using kicks and distance, and then as what he was doing was that he was using kicks to keep Cody off of him, and then as Cody took the extra couple steps to throw his hands, Pedro would give ground and catch him with counter the counter right. Cody doesn't seem like the smartest guy, and he is a little bit of a spaz. If you ever watched the Ultimate Fighter season with him and TJ Dillashaw, he was just the biggest spaz ever. But it's always sad to see people with crazy potential not be able to fight to the best of their ability for whatever reason, whether it be game plan, coaches, or their own emotions. And we know that he can be an amazing fighter, and he's put on those amazing performances. Unlike someone like Stefan Struve, who could have been the Jon Jones of the heavyweight division, but didn't know he never had a good fight in him. Whereas Cody, we've seen him, blast people, and we've seen him take out Dominic Cruz. Hopefully, Pedro earned his title shot now, but the UFC may be aiming for a rematch between Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw, or a rematch with TJ Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz. They have this little triangle going on where it seems like nobody other than TJ or Dillashaw or Cody Garbrandt for a while was fighting for the title. Next was Tetsuya Torres versus Weili Zhang, which is basically, to me, it wasn't that exciting of a fight. It was basically Zhang catching Torres' kicks and then taking her down off him and catching her for a couple strikes. Not too much to say about that one. Now, finally, the best and most controversial fight of the night, Lawler versus Askren. Before this, I didn't really see Askren having a great chance against Lawler, as Askren can't strike for love nor money. And the people that he was facing in one were a bunch of, Thai fighters with no wrestling backgrounds to speak of. And his biggest quality win was probably over Douglas Lima way back in the early Bellator days, where Lima had barely any fights underneath his belt. Lawler, on the other hand, is the former welterweight champion in the UFC, and he's faced beasts like Rory McDonald and Johnny Hendricks twice, both of them twice. And he's one of the best anti-wrestlers in the division. And what I mean by anti-wrestler is that he's one of the best at making it very difficult for wrestlers to be able to catch him with the double leg takedowns. Usually what he does is that he feeds them the single leg, and then he'll usually hop to the fence and have his back against the fence and start fighting off the takedown that way. That way the fence can hold him up. And the single leg is way harder to finish than the double leg takedown. And so the way that the fight started was Askren doing his thing. He was walking forward and with his hands out like a mummy, but he had none of the effectiveness of the mummy guard that George Foreman had. He went and grabbed a hold of Lawler just to get picked up and slammed on his own head WWE style and take some big shots from Lawler. To be honest, I thought that the fight was going to get stopped. The way that Robbie was hitting Askren, and it kind of looked like his eyes rolled back into his head a couple times. And there was even this really cool point that both of them end up in this position that in wrestling they call the dog fight, or the 50-50 position. And that's essentially when they're both on their knees and one arm is over each other and then the one arm is posted on the ground. And what Lawler did was use this opportunity to post up on his left hand and then throw a left hand into Askren's face as they both fell down. It was really, really cool. But Askren, he managed to get up, and when he was out in the open, he still had nothing for Lawler, and he tries to go for the clinch again, but as he's entering the clinch, he's getting big body shots from Robbie Lawler, taking big knees into the stomach. He took them pretty well. Like, he took them, almost looked like he was gonna, say fuck it and back out of the clinch, but then he realized, if I'm out in the open, I'm just gonna get murked. He finally goes for the takedown. He gets an inside leg trip, and he transitions to Robbie's back, but then Robbie manages to turn around and turn into Ben Askren, but eventually he gets stuck in the bulldog choke headlock position. Now, this is where all the controversy happens. Lawler looks like he's going out with his hand on top of Askren's head, and it drops to the floor, and Herb Dean stops the fight. It was pretty anticlimactic considering how well the fight was going for Lawler, and even afterwards when Robbie was saying what Robbie was saying was that he couldn't hear Herb properly because the way the headlock was on him. He had Askren's forearm around his right ear, and then his left ear was pinned against Askren's body, so he couldn't really hear Herb Dean asking if he's still in there. And even if you watch the footage, you can see that Robbie Lawler gives Herb Dean the thumbs up as he has the choke on him, but Dean doesn't notice it. And really shitty way to end the fight, and I wish it would have kept on going, but who knows, you know what I mean? Like, maybe Lawler was about to go out if the hold was held on for another couple seconds. Who knows? What this showed me though was that even though Robbie Lawler, even though he may be in the twilight of his career, he's still a beast at welterweight, and Askren and Robbie Lawler is going to be a hard fight for anybody at the welterweight division. And Askren has a lot of work to do on the striking if he wants to be able to face the top level of competition. Because if he faces somebody who can half decently strike and has good wrestling wrestling defense, like Leon Edwards or Kamaru Usman or Colby Covington or Tyron Woodley, he's going to have the worst time ever. Next, what we had was Tyron Woodley versus Kamaru Usman. The biggest thing about this fight was that Tyron has always had this bad habit that he likes to back himself up against the cage and try to lure his opponents into a big right hand or shoot for a takedown. And the reason why he likes to shoot for the takedown off the fence is because a lot of times when you do go for the takedown, it is against the fence, and when you do take somebody down, the opponent can just wall climb back up. Whereas if you shoot from the fence into the open space, you have like 20 feet of open space to shoot into, and there's nothing to support the opponent. On the other hand, Usman is all about getting the opponent to the cage and working for takedowns. What he'll do is that he'll usually like pick up a single even, or just literally grab a clinch and hold on for dear life and try to get you to the fence, and that's where he's going to start working for takedowns. And as soon as he gets you down to the ground, he's just going to hold on to you and lay all over you and throw in a couple strikes. He's basically the less exciting version of Khabib. Now, Woodley's decision to go to the fence is a weird one, because when you have your back up against the fence like that, when you have your back against the fence, you're at a disadvantage, because if your opponent comes at you, you can't give ground to avoid strikes. You can only move two directions, left or right. And so if your opponent throws a power shot, there's a 50% chance that you're going to walk right into it. And again, if they shoot for a takedown, you can't sprawl your hips back as effectively. The cage is going to block your hips. And that's exactly what Usman exploited. He came forward, Tyron backed himself up against the fence, and Usman just had to make sure that he didn't get hit clean by the right hand as he came in, because Woodley doesn't have a left hand to speak about. And he started working for takedowns, and he was giving Woodley nice body shots, and when he got Woodley to the ground, he just laid all over Woodley. It was a really good fight on Usman's part, but I'm really not excited for the Colby Covington fight, because usually what happens when you have two really strong wrestlers who have the same principle, like Colby and Usman, they both like to come forward and try to get you against the fence, to drag you down to the ground and then start beating you up. But when you have two strong wrestlers who can't take each other down, you get a really boring and awkward kickboxing match where they just both stand at range and they just throw like awkward kicks and punches at each other. Kind of like Phil Davis versus Ryan Bader. And finally, Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith. There isn't that much to say about this fight. It was a typical Jones fight. That's all I really got to say about it. Jones came in and he did his thing, controlling the range with kicks, getting big takedowns, and whenever they were in the clinch, he controlled the clinch. Smith opened the first round with kicks to the lead leg, and that's something that every person who fights Jon Jones, who is planning to fight Jon Jones, should be doing, because he does lean a little heavy on that lead leg. And whenever it has been kicked from people from DC, the Rampage Jackson, Jones has been out of position and he's easier to hit. Unfortunately, Smith, he gave up on that tactic by the start of the second round and just stood at range. And for the most part, he was just getting kicked apart. He was getting picked apart by the low inline side kick and the oblique kick to his lead leg. And Jones would switch to southpaw sometimes and hit him with the southpaw left kick to the head and body, and sometimes the left straight to the body. And the thing is that if anybody wants a chance against Jon Jones, they're going to have to start by getting past his straight kicks, which seems like almost everyone just wants to try to walk through them, which is a terrible idea, because it's almost like if your game plan was, if you're facing somebody with a really good jab, you're going to walk through the jab. It's not really going to work, because there's a whole barrier blocking you from advancing. And the more you walk into that leg kick, the more your leg's going to get hurt and the more you're going to get exhausted, because every time you do step in, you're going to get stopped in your tracks. And it's hard. Imagine running a marathon and then every time you start catching momentum, somebody slapped you in the face or pushed you back. You know what I mean? You got to start building up the momentum again. And that's essentially what Jon Jones is doing. He keeps on breaking the momentum and he keeps on stopping you from getting in a range and getting your flow going. Alexander Gustafsson, on his first fight with Jon Jones, was essentially the first and only person who was able to diffuse the kicks effectively, and that was by using lateral movement. And Jones stopped going to those kicks when Alexander parried one of those kicks using his lateral movement, and he scored the first takedown on Jones's first UFC career, which is crazy to think about, because Alexander doesn't even have the wrestling pedigree of DC or Jackson or even Rashad Evans, and he's the one who scored the easiest takedown. Jones, he can throw hard, but his boxing has never been good. So once you're inside punching range, your job gets a lot easier on how to deal with Jones. And obviously there was also the controversy where Jones threw the knee to Smith's head, and everyone is saying that Smith did the honorable thing by not taking the DQ win, but to be honest, I feel like if he had taken the win or the no contest, whatever it would have been result, that would have given him and his team enough time to look back at the tape on where they're having trouble, and that would also give Anthony Smith another big payday. And the thing is, of like fighting, you want to be in and out as soon as possible, because you don't want to have CTE or brain damage by the end of your career. So you want to make big money fast and then leave. One thing I also like to think about, would have been extremely funny if this was a DC versus Jones fight and one of them landed that knee on each other, just how bad they would have taken advantage of that foul and how bad they would have held it over each other's heads. Anyways, yes, another great performance by Jones. I don't know what the next move for him at light heavyweight is. Maybe Thiago Santos, he just beat Jan Blachowicz. Or maybe you can make the case that Johnnie Walker can get a title shot if he gets at least one more big name win. I'd like to see Jones. Personally, I'd like to see Jones move up a weight class and fight someone who loves to kick like Alistair Overeem. But to be honest, even Overeem, he's another guy like Diego Sanchez who should have retired 100 years ago. But when you're getting paid, $1 million just to show up, and just to show up, not even to win, I can see why the dude's still in the game. It would have been interesting. I think the best matchup for Jones would have been Alistair Overeem before he got busted for steroids. Just because he has really, really strong kicking game and a really, really strong clinch game. And I think really strong kicking game and a really strong clinch game would have given Jones a lot of trouble. Well, those were my thoughts on the UFC 235 card. A little late, but better late than never, I suppose. I'm gonna do a quick podcast as well this Friday to break down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 145 card, which has a couple of decent names on there, like JDS, Nico Price, Tim Means, Ben Rothwell, and Beneil Dariush. All great fighters. I really enjoy watching. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out my other videos. I'm going to be doing more video essays on what the plan is that I want to do more video essays breaking down fighters and techniques, and hopefully I'm going to do that pretty soon here. I hope you have a blessed day. Peace.